Rose Velasco, and welcome back to the Women's Empowered Health Solutions Yoga Series blog. We are at Down Dog this week. So I'm really excited to share this with you because it's one of those poses that activates all 7 chakras, and it's very important that you are stable and supporting your body in this pose, and I'm excited to share with you. Last week, we left off with child's pose, Balasana, and this week we're going into Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. So we'll go ahead and start from Balasana. So with our big toes together and our knees mat width apart and our arms stretched out and our forehead either on a mat or on a block is where we begin. Once we are coming out of child's pose, we come back to tabletop position. So again, tops of the feet are to the mat. We arrange the knees underneath the hips and the wrists underneath the shoulders here. And our hands are nice and wide. And remember, we press down through the L shape between the index finger and the thumb in those large knuckles. We're pressing the mat away from us. Our spine is neutral. We're holding the head up in line with the spine. And as we move into downward facing dog, we curl the toes under, lift the knees up, scoop the hips back and up into downward facing dog. And the reason why I invite you to come into it this way, rather than some ways that you may hear in yoga studios to lift the hips up and then back, because you're putting the focus on the legs being straightened and the heels touching the ground, and the low back has a tendency to bend. But when coming from the way that I instruct it, we lift the knees, scoop the hips back, creating length into the spine, and then we begin to straighten into the legs. So the legs never have to straighten. The heels never have to touch the ground. But we're finding length in through the spine. The low back is nice and flat. We're reaching the tailbone towards the sky and reaching the crown of the head towards the mat between the hands. You can tuck the chin slightly here, pressing the back of the head back just a little bit and gazing at the toes. So maybe your downward facing dog has quite a bend into the knees, and that is perfectly fine. You can start to walk the dog here by straightening into one leg. You notice the hips will come to one side, and then the opposite foot, lifting the heel and lowering the opposite heel. So this is what we call walking the dog. And my dog is probably wondering where his leash is right about now, because I said both the W word and the D word. So here we're walking the dog. And then we find our expression of downward facing dog by lifting up into the toes, bending into the knees, finding that length into the spine again, and then just lowering the heels and straightening the legs as far as they go for you today. So I'm going to show this to you from another point of view. I'm going to show you from the frontal view so you can see what my shoulders are doing when I start to cue stabilizing the shoulders. So I'm just going to move the blanket off to the side. I'm going to plant the hands firmly on the mat. Let me show you another little trick too before I move on. If the wrists are sore in downward facing dog, you can always do a little tri-fold to your mat. Rest the palms on the mat with the fingers hanging off. And this gives a little bit more cushion when coming into downward facing dog, a little more cushion into the wrists. Another really important note to take with the hands is that if we're not pushing down through this L shape between index finger and thumb, we have a tendency to roll into the outer wrists onto the heels, and this creates space between the palms and the mat. Looks much like this. If you can see my hands here, we start to lift up. And this puts a lot of the weight into the outer wrists. So if we press the palms down firmly, pressing down through the L shape between index finger and thumb, and we're also pressing down through the fingers as the fingers are nice and wide on the mat, that's going to give us a little bit more stability from the bottom up. Now, as we move forward, I'm going to instruct you to turn the biceps slightly forward and rest the torso down onto the arm bones. And you'll watch me do this as I take the pose, and I'll instruct it at the same time. So again, knees underneath the hips, wrists underneath the shoulders, toes are curled under on the mat. Lift the knees, scoop the hips back and up. Sometimes people will wear their shoulders as earrings, and this is not sustainable. We want to turn the biceps slightly forward, triceps slightly back, and then rest the torso down onto the arm bones, giving a lot of space between the shoulders and the ears. It almost feels as if your shoulder blades are moving towards the outer ribs. And this sort of naturally gives us that sense of settling in and creating a lot of stability. This will help you to be more sustainable and more comfortable in this pose. So you can try it for yourself. And then find a nice comfortable position, because Adho Mukha Svanasana is a resting pose. But do know that anytime we go through a flow, you can always take Balasana or child's pose with you throughout your entire practice at any time you need it. So thank you for watching. I hope that you're enjoying this vlog series on yoga, and I hope you look forward to the full flow at the end of the series. Namaste. The light and love within me sees that beautiful light and love within you. And Jai Bhagwan, victory to your spirit.